Hey there, and welcome back to the Complicated Kids podcast. I'm your host, Gabriele Nicolet. I'm a toddler whisperer, a parent coach, and a speech therapist. And today I have Jenn Glacel. Jenn, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I am so happy to be talking to you. We don't talk to each other enough, so any chance I get is a good chance.
Agreed.
So just remind, you've been on the podcast before, but remind the good people who you are and what you do, and then we'll get into our topic with today, which is masking.
Absolutely. So I am a psychotherapist, a play therapist. I'm autistic. I own a practice, Seven Corners Psychotherapy, where we work with young people as young as 3, all the way up through adults, parents, couples. Um, and we specialize in working with neurodivergent folks and also LGBTQIA plus folks. And with the younger ones, we use play therapy, and with everybody, we bring that lens to the work. So we work symbolically, we use a lot of creative modalities, and working to help people understand themselves and trust themselves and know who they
Hmm.
are. I also have a nonprofit, the Washington Interdisciplinary Neurodiversity Group, WING, and we try and share resources, neurodiversity affirming resources, do some education, and then provide places for neurodivergent folks to connect and be centered. And so we have some book clubs that run and do some Autism 101 webinars to help answer some questions, and we're still growing.
And if you haven't already, go listen to the episode with Jenn where we talk about neurodiversity and neurodivergence, what those mean, what it is, what it's not. That was a really good primer. And then if you want to go deeper, we'll link to the website where there's lots of resources for folks who want to learn more, because you're really, really great at providing those for folks who would like to know more and who don't have the opportunity elsewhere. So it's a good thing. All right. So masking, in particular, autistic masking. What is it?
Autistic masking. Well, to start, masking is something we all do, right? Everybody in the world, all humans, mask or camouflage. Um, in the Black community, they use the phrase code switching, right? What is the environment I am in, and how do I need to be to move through that environment? So all people do that. And that is one aspect of what autistic people do when we talk about masking. It's often but not always conscious. It's often but not always learned. And as I said, it's always a natural human trait. When we talk about autistic masking specifically, there is another layer to it. And I almost wish we had 2 different words for these 2 different phenomena. Because what I just described is the more commonly understood way of masking. So I'm going to practice what I'm going to say before I walk into the room. I'm going to watch a TV show and then mimic how the kids on the TV show interact with their peers in my life. But autistic masking has a deeper unconscious side to it, that is the unconscious suppression of the sensory experience. Mm-hmm. And so this kind of masking starts at birth.
Yeah.
So it is truly not a conscious, oh, I know I'm doing this activity. It is a survival skill from the traumatic experience of being in a saturated world, in a world that is overwhelming to the senses. There's a wonderful book by Kieran Rose and Amy Pearson called Autistic Masking that really gets into this. And so for people who want to know more, that is a wonderful source. And both of them have done some excellent work in other areas of writing and webinars and whatnot that to go into this topic. So what does this mean, right? The unconscious suppression of the sensory experience. And that is that the autistic nervous system doesn't notice that it's being overwhelmed. It deals with that in other ways. It comes up in my head feels fuzzy, or I don't like this. but the autistic person is unable to really understand why that is. They have forgotten what they used to know in some cases, or never knew it to begin with. In his course, The Inside of Autism, Kieran Rose describes the idea of a baby who is really sensitive to touch. What do we do with babies? We hold them. When they cry, what do? We pick them up. Uh, we shake them around, gently shake them around, pat their back. We do the bounce. Well, if a baby is sensitive to touch, what we think is soothing might actually be painful. And so they cry more. And so we touch them more. And so at some point, the baby goes, oh, this isn't working. And so they begin to put a wall between their sensory experience of touch and what they realize they're experiencing.
And that can happen. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong about this, that's trauma. That's like a dissociative response, right?
Absolutely.
Where this is completely inadvertent on everybody's part, but it is possible in this scenario to traumatize the baby such that the crying response is not getting them what they need. They try harder, and then they give up. And They split off, and they don't say, but they intuit, the brain pieces together that I can't get my need met out there. I'm going to shut it down and not have that need, or try not to have that need. And I'm sure you're going to tell me like about leakage somewhere.
Right.
Or I'm going to try to meet this need myself by doing some other things.
Yes. And I want to say, this is not to say we should not hold our babies all the time. That is not any part of what I'm saying. But I think this example is so powerful because when masking is spoken about, typically we think of it as a conscious response that someone is choosing to do. And this demonstrates the deep unconscious roots that it can often come from.
I'm wondering about sort of flashing forward to a toddler or even a child of school age who's overwhelmed by auditory phenomenon, who finds themselves either when they're at home, everything's fine, right? Maybe they spent their first 3 years at home with a preferred caregiver and everything's reliable and quiet, and that caregiver knows how to accommodate that child's sensory needs, probably without really realizing it. And then they go to school and they're bombarded by sound that they don't understand, don't know how to process, can't really filter. And that might also create this kind of schism where it's like, I can't actually be here and listen to that. So since you're telling me I have to be here because you're preventing me from running away, now I am going to ignore, shut off, create the wall between, the barrier between my auditory sense and the rest of myself. It's an act of self-preservation.
Yes, absolutely. And when this happens, some toddlers are going to deal with it by acting out, by telling everyone else, I am in distress. This situation is overwhelming to me. And they are going to get a lot of attention for that. And others are going to manage that by shutting down, creating this kind of separate place, dissociating, and they begin to look like the model children.
Yeah.
And so then they get praised for this. And so there is this other loop that begins happening of, if I meet everyone's needs around me, things go well for me. There are positive benefits to that. And I'm saying that again as if it's a conscious process. That's not what's happening consciously. That is unconsciously happening within the child. And so then you end up with your model student, pleasure to have in class, who are young people who are doing their best in the system and have really shut down access to the way they are being overwhelmed.
It's so interesting, right? If I can please everybody else, I'll minimize damage to myself,
Yes.
which is far from, like really far away from, I can get my needs met.
Yes. And is not true because this practice of shutting down our sensory experience is exhausting.
Hmm. Okay, talk about that a little bit. Yep.
So I'll use myself as an example. When I was 16, I was exhausted. I was just so tired all the time to the point that my parents took me to the doctor. And the doctor, this was in the early 90s and chronic fatigue syndrome had just become a thing. And so I had a 15-minute appointment and he said, "You have chronic fatigue syndrome and you should take some medicine." And I thought, that doesn't feel right. Let me try some exercise and then I'll check back in with you. And I started riding my bike more and I felt better. And the cycle continued. In college, I went to a therapist and I said, "I'm just exhausted all the time." He, in fact, recommended exercise. And I said, "Well, I've done this before. I can do this again." And I stayed in this exhausted place for 30 years. My baseline answer to the question, "How are you?" was tired.
Mm-hmm.
And that varied with, wasn't always deep exhaustion. And during these many years, I went to a lot of therapy. And it wasn't until I began to understand myself as autistic
Mm.
and began to learn what that really meant and learn how my nervous system works and what that means before I stopped being exhausted.
Yeah.
This constant energy that I was producing to shut down my sensory experience exhausted me. And no amount of external thing could fix that for me.
Yeah.
It took a shift into, oh, how do I work? What do I need? And now how do I have the how do I rearrange my life to meet those needs, which is a privileged thing that I've been able to do.
So let's take your example. I love it in some ways because it's really illustrative of what was happening in those 30 years, right? Things were
Mhm.
getting, it's like a slow drip of exhaustion and then cycling through and pushing harder. And it turns out your adrenal glands will actually absorb some of that when you're young. Your body has duplicative systems to push through periods of stress. Some people's work pretty well. A lot of kids I see right now, not working at all. So, so there's that piece of it, which is like, yeah, we can handle a certain amount of stress. Our bodies are designed for that, but not chronic long-term stress. So that's the first thing. But if we go back to kids who are the younger kids who are coming around now who are autistic, and by the way, there are many, many more of them, those nervous systems are coming out. They are kind of arriving with nervous systems that are even more sensitive than other autistic folks before them. That's the world according to Gabriele. I don't know if you see that the same way.
I have a theory about that. Um, I'm not sure that there are more autistic kids right now than there were,
Okay.
but the last 10 years have been exceptionally stressful for this country and culture as a whole. Not to say it was not stressful before, but there was a shift in some way in the lead up to the 2016 election.
Mm.
And that is only more stressful, I think, in hindsight. I think at the time it probably maybe wasn't more or less than other periods of deep stress. But then COVID happened. And COVID was a international traumatic event for every single person who was alive or born into it.
Mhm.
And so what might have been a nervous system, an autistic nervous system that was more stressed than a non-autistic nervous system living in society, everything was multiplied by 100 for everyone. And actually, that's a little bit wrong. For a more normative nervous system, it was multiplied by 10.
Mhm.
For a neurodivergent nervous system, it was multiplied by 100.
Yeah. Yep.
And so you've got kids right now who never had a period of security, even if they had all their needs met, because everything was insecure. What happened in March of 2020 was that all of our systems broke down. And so kids who we've always taught our children, there's something you can rely on. You can rely on your parents. Some can also rely on a school system. Some could rely on the government. Every level fell apart. And so kids were going, well, if you can't handle this, I definitely can't. And so I think that's why we're seeing now
Mm.
nervous systems that they have been, I don't know what the right phrase is, but their baseline is not where it used to be.
Yeah. That's super
And
interesting.
yeah,
So like a different octave almost.
yes. There's a combination here too with the understanding we have about neurodivergence, about autism now,
Mm.
the way people are talking about it, the way people like me who successfully masked for 46 years and did not know about this myself, being in a mental health field, know about it now and talk about it now and help others understand themselves. One of the things that happens to people when they begin to understand themselves is they lose the ability to unconsciously suppress their sensory experience. And so it looks like things get harder or more stressful.
Ah.
Let me give you an example. Again, for me, I like using me as an example because I don't have any confidentiality about myself. I have never been a shopper. Doesn't matter what kind of shopping, grocery, clothes, whatever. It's always been a negative experience. I've never liked it. I used to just think I wasn't good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd go into a store and I'd walk out fuzzy headed and overwhelmed and needing a nap. And I just thought, I just don't know how to pick up clothes, and pick out clothes, and so I get overwhelmed by it, and it's just not a skill I have. But I could do it. I would go in the store and I'd find clothes and I might take them home to try them on, but or I'd go to the grocery store and I'd get the food that I needed. Now that I understand my sensory experience, I can't even do that. I go into a grocery store. I just don't go into clothing stores anymore. Thank goodness we can order things online.
Yeah.
But I go into a grocery store and I actually am having the sensory experience that my body is experiencing.
Mm.
The lights hurt my eyes. The number of choices overwhelms my head. So whereas before I just feel yucky, now I am feeling the overwhelm. And so whereas before I could go and get the things on the list, now I can't even find the things on the list in the store. And so it looks like I'm doing worse.
This is so interesting. The thing that just popped into my head is alcoholics, which is when one is an addict, one has used substances to numb to one's emotions, right? That's why
Mm-hmm.
most addicts do what they do, is my understanding, right? They have a lot of pain, they have a lot of emotion, they're sensitive,
Mm-hmm.
emotionally sensitive, probably sensory sensitive too. Who knows? Right?
Let's be honest.
Let's be honest. And probably they have masked, but then they're using alcohol on top of that to mask. And then you strip away the alcohol, now all you've got left is the pain. And until you process that pain, it is a very gnarly place to be. Now, in your case, I'm guessing this sensory sensitivity, it came with you, it's leaving with you, it's not going away. So,
Now,
yeah.
if I need to go into a store, I plan for it differently now.
Yeah.
So I go to a store I know. I wear ear defenders. I have a small list of things. I'm not trying to do the whole big shopping. Again, thank goodness for online ordering. And so then I can prepare for that experience in a different way. And it still might be overwhelming, but I've prepared for that overwhelm. I know I know what I need before and what I need after. And so it's not that I'll never now be in a situation that's overwhelming, but hopefully I'll be able to prepare for that.
And the knowledge that you have is also armor. It's not armor, it's a tool,
It's a tool. Mm-hmm.
right? Knowing that you're likely to be overwhelmed is way better than having no idea that you're likely to be overwhelmed.
Yes.
And I think this is where we get it wrong often as people who work with children in particular, in my line of work, right? Which is, I think sometimes we think that if we accommodate needs, that we're
Mm-hmm.
going to teach them that I don't actually know where the wires get crossed, but like that we're going to teach them, we're not going to teach them what they need to know to be in the world.
Right.
And nothing could be further from the truth. And I'll tell you what, from my perspective, it starts from allowing a toddler to say no.
Absolutely.
Because when we allow that, and this goes to levels of sensory, of consent, of relationship, of protecting your physical space. Like this has the 2-year-old that says no is protecting themselves on so many different levels. And the parents who allow that 2-year-old to say no are protecting their child at so many different levels. Because when we allow that, then we're allowing that system to stand on more solid ground, in a way that, and then we can talk about sort of masking on top of that too. But like, help me out here because I'm losing the thread, but I'm going somewhere with this, and I feel very strongly about it. Clearly.
Well, I'll take you where I'm going, and it may be the same place, or it may help you conceptualize of where you're going. But when we allow someone to say no, we also allow them to say yes.
Love it.
And someone who talks about this a lot is another British therapist, Naomi Fisher. Uh, and the idea that if someone can say no and know that they will be heard on that, it gives them the ability to say, okay, yes, I'll try it, because they know if it doesn't go well, they will be supported through that experience that doesn't go well.
Yeah.
If they don't feel that their no will be trusted, then it's not safe to say, yes, I'll try it, because they won't be able to walk it back.
Yeah.
And that can be really hard for parents because it involves a deep, explicit trust in their child, who may be a 2-year-old saying, no, I don't want to do that. And it may be something that on the outside appears silly.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter was one who always shut down. I didn't know this at the time. She got praised a lot for how well she did in restaurants.
Mm.
And I think about one year when we went to an Easter brunch and she did not want to go see the Easter Bunny. And it seemed so silly, right? But being able to trust her that this was not a good experience for her then allowed for her, when it was time to go find Easter eggs, to go do that.
Yep, because she didn't have to cut the whole day off because
Yes.
nobody would listen to her, and it's a little bit of like punishment, self-punishment, self-removal, right?
Right.
Which is, I think, this same idea of like dissociation, like this is not working for me, I'm out, goodbye.
Yes. Right. As opposed to, this is not working for me, but I know you will help me through it.
Oof. And isn't that the place where we want to be?
It is. We think about it in such a strange way in our culture. I've started really using the metaphor of a marathon
Hmm.
because marathons, and I'm not a runner, and I don't ever want to be a runner, so there's that. But marathons are hard. They're hard on the body. They're physically intense. They take a lot of effort to train for them, often to the exclusion of all other things in one's life. And then it's a grueling day. And then your body is, for some people, broken for a while. And, there needs to be lots of rest and healing. And we've just really championed people who want to run marathons. What a lofty goal. And yes, we will allow you to say no to all dinner dates between now and the marathon because we understand. And then we will get up at a very early hour and come cheer you on. And then we will let you rest afterwards. But we don't do that for so many things in life.
Hmm.
But often the experience of a neurodivergent person, of an autistic person in the world, going to school is running a marathon. Going to the grocery store, it's running a marathon. I need to prepare. I might not be able to do anything else in the day, and then I need to rest and recover. And so
And
can we give that kind of cheer to those little things that are hard for people?
and I think it starts, the parents that I work with, it really starts from understanding that that is real, that
Yes.
one's nervous system capacity, how one processes sensory information, which, by the way, only the experiencer can know
Yes.
and nobody else. So this is where it gets wonky because we think, kids love the swings. Well, not my kid. Kids love birthday parties. Well, not my kid. Kids love the Easter Bunny or Elmo. I took my daughter when she was 4. Took her to Sesame Place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Elmo was there, big red Elmo. She was freaking terrified.
That's so funny. I had a similar experience. I took my daughter with my dad. It was such a Sesame Street Live. We had front row tickets. My daughter loved Sesame Street at the time. I loved Sesame Street. We had to leave early.
Mm-hmm.
We were too close. It was too scary.
It was too scary. It was too much. And so we have these preconceived notions of like, this stuff is fun, capital F, except it's not fun for them. And so particularly with birthday parties, I'm a big fan of like, if it's not fun, don't do it. Don't do it. It's unnecessary. But that nervous system reality, right? There is a neurobiological signature that we all come with. We're all calibrated the way we're calibrated. And again, nobody's calibrated exactly the way that I am and the way that you are. It has to be honored. Well, it doesn't have to be honored, but when we don't honor it, we do so to the detriment of that system.
I lost you for a minute, but you're back.
Yep. Yeah, we cannot override in
We
perpetuity.
should not. We should not
not.
because we can and do.
Yeah.
And it comes back to this idea of trusting a person. When they say, I don't want to do this, believe them. And one of the things I often say to help parents with that is it's okay for your child to get it wrong and have some regret. No, I don't want to go to that event. Oh, wow, that sounded like it was fun. I wish I had gone. Okay, well, that's good information for us. And most things there are a next time. And if there's not, well, that's a big loss, but we can handle loss.
Yeah.
It's okay to say, yes, I want to go. And then, oh, that was a mistake. And let me not go.
Yeah.
So often facial expressions don't match one's experience. And so when someone says to you, yes, I'm having a good time, even if they're frowning, believe them.
Okay. If you tell me if I've got this right though. If that person is autistic and they have a frown and they say, I'm having a good time, believe them.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have the opposite, which is if that person is more neuronormative and they have a frown and they say, I'm having a good time, maybe don't believe them.
Here's yes, and
Okay, good.
trust that they're telling you that they're having a good time for a reason.
Okay.
Even if they don't know what it is, people get to tell the white lie. People get to make you think that they like something that they don't. There may be very good reason that they're not being fully truthful. And so they get to say, yes, I enjoy this, and now I'm going to do it every day for the rest of my life. And they get to know that it's not true, and they get to have that experience.
Nice. Love it.
And so that's what the underlying trust is, that it's not necessarily trust they're telling you the truth.
Mm-hmm.
It's trust that they know what is best for themselves. And if it is a person with whom you have a good, close relationship, you can then at some point talk about that, usually not in the moment, right? Because it may be that you've asked in the middle of the birthday party when they're dying inside, but they're too aware of everyone around them to be able to tell you that. And so in the moment, it's, yes, I'm fine. And then on the way home, it's, okay, actually, I was not okay. Can we not do that anymore?
I
But
love
if
it.
you're meant to know the information and you have the relationship, it will come to you.
So good. Let people have their own experience.
Yes, we need to mask sometimes. All of us
Mhm.
we need to suppress our sensory experience sometimes. We need to pretend. We need to sometimes meet the needs of people around us. And what we want to do is be conscious about that and make choices about, okay, I'm going to go to this event because it's important to so and so, and it's actually my nightmare, but I'm going to go, I'm going to do it, I'm going to prepare ahead of time, and I'm going to rest afterwards. And if we then ask people to tell us the truth on top of that, that actually negates their hard work at showing up for somebody else.
Mm, I love it. I love it.
So it gets complicated because the unnuanced conversation is just stop masking. Well, no, that doesn't really work.
Mm-mm.
Doesn't really work.
Conscious masking.
Yes. It's why I think we need different words,
Hmm.
right? Because it's the unconscious that is so harmful because we don't actually know that it's happening.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a silly story again about myself. It's not actually silly, it's actually deeply sad,
Mm.
but I like to think of it as silly because that makes it easier. When I was a child, I knew what my favorite number was. I actually had two, 243 and 729.
Mm.
These are odd favorite numbers.
They are. They're not at all my favorites.
Yeah, right. And they're long and they are my favorite numbers because did you know that if you take any number and add the digits up into it and they equal 3, 6, or 9, that number is divisible by 3, and if they equal 9, it is divisible by 9. 243 and 729 are both divisible by 9, and they show up on a digital clock twice a day. What a beautiful, I can look at my clock and I can see my favorite number. But this is weird. Okay, this is weird.
Uh-huh.
At some point, I don't know when, but at some point I forgot that information about myself. I forgot my favorite numbers and why.
Hmm.
And as an adult, I have a lot of things, email addresses, that have the number 22 in it. That's my husband's favorite number. And I just didn't have one, so I co-opted his when we got serious. And it wasn't until I discovered that I'm autistic and began to figure out what that meant that I remembered this weird, funky thing about me, that I have these bizarre favorite numbers and why. That was a form of autistic masking, hiding this piece of information from about myself from myself So that when I did the get to know you thing at a new job or in college or, class in high school, I could say an answer that didn't raise eyebrows. But I didn't do it intentionally. It just happened.
And that's where, that is a sad story, actually.
It is.
And that I think illustrates the point really beautifully, which is without, if we are not, if we as adults in children's lives, practitioners, parents, whatever, if we are not actively educating our children about their nervous systems and about themselves, we are doing a real disservice, and we're essentially creating a situation where they must, and this is going to happen anyway, and it's okay. I always tell my kids, like, you're going to talk to your therapist about different things than I talk to my therapist about. Like, that's just a given. That's the human condition. Fine. But we can make that space a little broader, a little more comfortable, a little less noisy for kids when they understand something about themselves and about their brains. And I think this is true for all humans. Like, I wish that we had brain education and emotion education as part of the human curriculum, which maybe we will sometime. I don't know.
Yes. Yes, because it's all, right, again, all people mask. All people have a variety of sensory needs. And so, yes, one who's had an identified nervous system as autistic has, we know more or less than what's expected. But I'm not actually sure there are neurotypical people out there. I think there are people, Nick Walker uses the word neuronormative instead of neurotypical, people who more naturally fit the cultural expectations.
Yeah.
But even they get to figure out how they work and what they need. They get to say no to something because they just don't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't fit with their needs. They get to say yes to something that doesn't fit with their needs, but they want to do anyway.
Mm-hmm.
There was a path where I could have hidden this favorite number from everyone else, but held it as my own thing. And for those, in a small circle around me. But because in order to manage my world through no one's fault, there's no blame here. No one was trying to traumatize me, but my nervous system got traumatized anyway. And the way I handled that was meeting everybody's needs and shutting off my sensory experience of the world, the way my brain was working.
Yeah. Yeah.
From myself. And that's what we don't want, because I didn't trust myself. Now I trust myself and I can do even more than I could do before. And at times less.
That is a beautiful place to end. I so appreciate this conversation. I appreciate all conversations with you because they are always very nuanced, and I feel like really actionable. So, Jenn Glacel, thank you.
You are welcome. I love our conversations as well because they always help me to go to new depths about it.
Thank you. If people want to find out more about you, maybe take a class, maybe work with you, send you some folks, how do they do that?
So the practice website is sevencornerspsychotherapy.com. The 7 is all written out. We are in Falls Church, Virginia. The Wing website is wing, WING dash DMV.com. And we do quarterly Autism 101 workshops, and I hold a monthly conversation hour for anyone who's been to one of those workshops. And those are all pay what you can afford.
That is like an absolutely fabulous resource. And is that available for people who are outside the DMV as well?
Yes, those are all virtual. And so, yes, we've had people, I don't know how they find us, but from other countries at this point, coming to join us. So
perfect. We will link to all of that in the show notes. And until next time, thank you.
Thank you.